9 days before Thanksgiving, she posted a photo. A house she bought. Alone. Decorated, warm, and safe. Caption: blessed and grateful. 36 hours later, she was bleeding out on the floor. 3 gunshots. Her toddler standing there, confused, still holding a sippy cup. The shooter? Not a stranger. Not a burglar. It was her ex, Shakia Perkins. The same woman who had already burned her cars, slashed her tires, threatened to kill her, texted her, "I'm going for first degree." Stamp that. This wasn't random. Corneisha had called for help 13 times, filed a restraining order, reported 27 separate incidents. The system didn't miss the red flags. It ignored them. Shakia had 4 open domestic violence cases. She was out on bail. She walked free every time. And on November 16th, 2022, she walked into Corneisha's house like it was nothing, fired 3 times, and walked back out just as calm. No warning shot, no struggle, just execution, in front of her child, while her stroke-stricken mother sat helpless in the next room. What happens when a restraining order becomes a death sentence? When do everything right still gets you murdered in your own home? When a woman's final hours are traceable, and yet no one stops it? This isn't a story about passion. It's a case file on systemic failure. And you're about to see every warning, every plea, every missed chance to save her life. Because this is true crime undercover. And Corneisha Butler deserved better. A Wednesday. Cloudy skies over South Fulton, Georgia. It was the kind of ordinary morning that never hints at what's coming. Corneisha Butler got up early, before the kids. She packed school lunches, ironed uniforms, and double-checked backpacks like she always did. Her older daughters were out the door by 7:15. Routine. Fast. Focused. By 7:30 a.m., she was behind the wheel of her SUV, driving her youngest, a 2-year-old boy, to daycare. He had a runny nose. She promised him Sprite after his nap. After drop-off, Corneisha headed to her office. She'd built her own tax prep business from scratch. IRS registered. Client list growing. Around 11 a.m., she handled 2 calls and scheduled 3 appointments for the following week. Thanksgiving was coming. Business was about to slow down. But she had big plans for the holiday. Her first Thanksgiving in the new house. Her house. At 2:15 p.m., she picked her son up early from daycare. He developed a low fever. A receipt timestamp from a local pharmacy confirmed she bought children's medicine at 2:43 p.m. baby Tylenol, Pedialyte, and a bag of lemon halls. By 3 p.m., neighbors saw her return home, grocery bags in one hand, her son on her hip. The boy tugged at her earrings like he always did. They laughed. What Corneisha didn't know was that someone else was nearby. Shakia Perkins, her ex. Phone data later confirmed that Shakia's phone had pinged cell towers near the daycare earlier that afternoon, then near the pharmacy, then right in Corneisha's neighborhood. At 4:30 p.m., a security camera 3 doors down caught a glimpse of a car pulling up slowly to the curb. The driver sat there, engine running, no movement for nearly 40 minutes. Inside that car was a 9mm handgun, legally purchased just 2 weeks earlier. At 5:12 p.m., Corneisha made what would be her final post. A photo of the Thanksgiving decorations she'd been working on. The caption read, "Getting ready to host my first holiday in the new house. Blessed and grateful." She added a smiley face and a fall leaf emoji. At 5:44 p.m., Shakia walked toward the house. No mask, no gloves, no rush. This time, she didn't break in. She knocked, calmly, like a friend dropping by. It's believed Corneisha opened the door to avoid a scene. Her mother, recovering from a stroke, was resting inside. Her toddler had just settled on the couch with a juice box. And maybe, just maybe, Corneisha still hoped it wouldn't escalate. Not this time. They argued. Not screaming, but sharp. Low tones. Just loud enough for a neighbor across the yard to notice movement by the window. At 6:03 p.m., The first gunshot went off, followed by 2 more. 3 rounds, fired at close range. 2 in the chest, 1 in the abdomen. No sign of a struggle, no defensive wounds. She dropped where she stood. The 2-year-old boy wandered into the room moments later. His socks left small, wet imprints in the pool of blood spreading across the hardwood. He cried, but not like he understood, just loud enough to be heard next door. Shakia stepped over him. Calm, silent. She walked out through the front door, drove off. She didn't call 911. At 6:07 p.m., a neighbor finally did. The dispatcher asked, "Are you sure it's gunshots?" The caller said, "No, but I hear a baby crying and nothing else." Before she was a headline, before the restraining orders, the burned cars, and the courtrooms, she was Corneisha Butler, a mother of 4, a businesswoman, and the glue in a family that had seen more than its share of hardship. She was born and raised in Memphis, Tennessee. If you ask people who knew her back then, they'll all tell you the same thing. She had that spark, that kind of presence that could walk into a room and change the whole mood without saying a word. Not loud, not showy, just real. A sharp tongue when she needed it, a soft touch when she didn't. She carried her people, always had. Her kids were her everything. 3 daughters, 1 son. They were never on the sidelines of her life. They were the center of it. She didn't party. She didn't disappear. She worked. She showed up. And she built. She became a certified tax preparer with the IRS, running her own business in a world that wasn't made easy for women like her. During the tax season, she'd put in long days, helping everyday people navigate paperwork, audits, and government confusion. But that wasn't all. She was also a licensed esthetician, skincare, beauty services. She had a talent for detail, and she made people feel good when they sat in her chair. That's how she moved, professional, dependable, self-taught. No shortcuts, no handouts, just sweat, skill, and sacrifice. When the opportunity came to relocate, she didn't hesitate. Atlanta offered more for the kids, more clients, better schools, a fresh start, and she grabbed it with both hands. Within 2 years of landing in Georgia, she closed on a 5-bedroom house. Not rented, bought, fully paid for. She called it her reset, a place where each child could have their own room, where holidays could be celebrated properly, where nothing needed to be shared, except joy. She posted that house with pride. Been in Atlanta almost 2 years. Best decision we could have made. My kids been through hell and back with me. It's only right I give them a life I never had. That wasn't just social media talk. She meant every word. If the kids needed clothes, she'd skip her own appointments. If they needed lunch money, she'd delay her phone bill. Birthday parties weren't an option, they were tradition. First day of school, she showed up, every time, camera in hand. Even her neighbors noticed. The woman who always had a toddler on her hip, groceries in her arms, a smile on her face. She wasn't trying to survive anymore. She was trying to thrive. And for the first time in years, she was doing it without fear, without chaos, without compromise. But that's the thing about rebuilding. Not everyone's happy when you finally stop sinking. And the very independence she fought so hard to create, that's what made her dangerous to someone who couldn't let go. One of her closest friends once said, she lit up every room, but she never needed attention. She just wanted peace. And that's what makes this story unbearable. Because peace was the one thing she thought she finally had. Corneisha met Shakia Perkins in Memphis sometime around 2016. It started like something out of a romance movie. Shakia was persistent, texting good mornings, leaving flowers, planning surprise dinners, public posts, private gifts. Friends said she was charming, protective, intense in a way that could make you feel chosen. And in the beginning, that intensity looked a lot like love. Corneisha, who had been through her share of rough relationships, saw in Shakia something that looked like stability. Someone who paid attention. Someone who showed up. Within months, Shakia was spending nights. By month 6, she'd moved in. And from that point forward, everything started to shift. It was slow, strategic. First, the constant texting. Then the questions. Where you at? Who's that on your story? Then came the rules. What to wear, who to block, when to be home. If she was 5 minutes late, Shakia accused her of cheating. If she made a new client, Shakia interrogated her. What started as attention turned into surveillance. Shakia didn't just want to be in Corneisha's life. She wanted to be in control of it. Corneisha's friends noticed first. One by one, they were pushed away. If someone disagreed with how Shakia treated her, they were called fake, toxic, jealous of what we have. Family members stopped visiting as often. Calls went unanswered. Invitations stopped. Shakia made herself the center of Corneisha's world and then began to shrink it. It didn't stop there. Shakia barely contributed to bills, but constantly questioned Corneisha's spending. When Corneisha invested in her esthetician tools, Shakia called it a waste. When she posted photos of her tax office setup, Shakia accused her of showing off. She hated anything that made Corneisha feel independent, empowered, visible. And the more successful Corneisha became, the more dangerous Shakia got. One friend put it this way: Shakia didn't just want to love her, she wanted to own her. The jealousy wasn't limited to people. It extended to progress. Shakia resented the things Corneisha worked for, the clients, the recognition, the peace she was building. But Corneisha kept trying to make it work. For the kids, for the idea of what love could be. And every time she tried to leave, Shakia would pull her back in, with apologies, gifts, therapy appointments. She'd say all the right things. I'm working on it. I know I messed up. You're the only one I want. For a few weeks, things would be better, calm. And just when it felt safe, it would start again. But in 2021, something changed. Corneisha stopped believing the words. She stopped defending the chaos. She stopped coming back. She started building something without Shakia in it, quietly, carefully. A new routine, a new house, a life that wasn't built around defusing someone else's rage. And when Shakia saw that she was really losing control, she didn't beg, she didn't cry, she burned. By late 2021, Shakia Perkins was no longer just emotionally dangerous, she was physically violent. The first major incident happened on September 13, 2021. Corneisha was driving alone when Shakia ambushed her on the road, ramming into her car from the side, then swerving across both lanes to cut her off. The report says she struck both the driver's side and passenger side, trying to force her off the street entirely. Corneisha barely managed to escape. She messaged a friend immediately after. Shakia just tried to run me off the road. The friend responded in disbelief. What do you mean? She tried to hurt herself, or she tried to run you off the road? Corneisha clarified. Yes, she hit my car. Both sides. 12 days later, it escalated again. September 25, 2021. South Fulton police were dispatched to Corneisha's house. A Jeep Wrangler in her driveway was engulfed in flames. Next to it, her pink Mercedes. Both vehicles destroyed. The fire was so intense it singed part of the house. Investigators suspected arson immediately. Shakia was arrested and charged with 4 felonies. But she posted bond and walked out just 8 days later. And Corneisha? She filed for a restraining order. She thought maybe the court would protect her where love and loyalty had failed. The judge granted it for 1 year. But a piece of paper couldn't stop what was coming. Because Shakia didn't stop. She showed up outside Corneisha's workplace. She parked outside her house for hours. She harassed her through burner phones, calling, texting, breathing through the receiver. And she wasn't subtle. One message read, "You'll be dead soon. I'm going for first degree, not second." I stamped that. Another, "It's all fun and jokes until you're scared for your life." This wasn't rage. This was premeditation. Corneisha reported everything. She called police again and again. By the end, 27 separate incidents had been documented. From stalking, to vandalism, to threats, to arson, to assaults. For different domestic violence cases were opened. 4. And still, no sentence stuck. No arrest held. Every time a charge was filed, Shakia made bail. Every time Corneisha called for help, she was told, "Document it. Call if it gets physical. Wait and see if she comes back." Meanwhile, inside the house, things got worse. Her business equipment shattered. Thousands of dollars in losses. Skincare tools broken. Products dumped down the drain. This wasn't just sabotage, It was financial strangulation. Even her children's belongings weren't off limits. Their bikes were slashed, toys destroyed, their front yard turned into a silent message. I can reach you. I can reach them. Every step forward Corneisha took, Shakia tried to drag her 2 steps back. The cars, the threats, the stalking. It was a campaign of fear. And the target wasn't just Corneisha's body. It was her independence, her motherhood, her progress. And still, Shakia stayed free. Because for every threat Corneisha handed over, for every police report she filed, for every emergency hearing she sat through, the answer was always the same. Wait. Corneisha didn't stay silent. She didn't hide the bruises. She didn't excuse the behavior. She didn't wait for someone else to step in. She called police 13 times. She filed for protective orders more than once. She showed them the messages, the damage, the threats. She went to court. She asked for help. And still, Shakia Perkins walked free. Again and again. After torching 2 vehicles, after threatening murder in writing, after damaging business property, and even after violating a court-issued restraining order, Shakia wasn't held in custody. Instead, she posted bond. For separate times. One for arson, one for assault, one for criminal damage, one for violating the order that was supposed to protect Corneisha in the first place. The total bond? Less than some people pay to bail out their car from the impound lot. At one point, the judge set bond at just $5,000, even after prosecutors laid out clear evidence of intent to kill. The district attorney's office objected. Loudly, they warned judges in writing. This defendant presents an ongoing danger to the victim. Law enforcement said the same. South Fulton Police Chief Keith Meadows later told reporters, "We brought 4 separate cases. We made the arrests. The court system let her go." Corneisha wasn't confused about the danger. She knew what was coming. She told officers, repeatedly, that Shakia was stalking her, that she feared for her life, that the threats weren't just words. They were warnings. But every time she called, she got a different answer. Unless she makes contact. Unless she has a weapon. Unless it happens again. 2 weeks before her death, she called again. Shakia was outside, sitting in a car, watching the house. The officer arrived 45 minutes later. By then, Shakia was gone. The response? There's nothing we can do unless she steps on your property. 1 week later, she called again. This time, she reported Shakia showing up at her workplace, another violation of the restraining order. Same story, documented. And each time, the paper trail grew longer. But the protection didn't exist. This is what domestic violence escalation looks like. That's what one advocate said when reviewing the timeline. You can track it like a fuse. Starts with intimidation, then isolation, then property damage, then physical violence, and finally murder. That's not speculation. It's the pattern. And in Corneisha's case, it was textbook. For open cases, dozens of police reports, hundreds of text threats. And at the moment it mattered most, when she needed the courts to say enough, they handed the abuser a free pass and handed the victim more paperwork. There was no monitoring, no GPS tracking, no remand into custody, just bail and a second chance for Shakia to finish what she'd already promised in writing. And this wasn't just one judge's oversight. It was a failure spread across every layer of the system. Papers don't stop bullets. That's what Shakia allegedly told a serving officer when she refused to sign her restraining order. They didn't take that seriously, and Corneisha ended up paying the price. Corneisha's morning started like it always did: school drop-offs, client calls, a pharmacy stop. She picked up her toddler early from daycare. He had a slight fever. She gave him Tylenol, laid out his favorite snacks, and turned on cartoons. Then she set to work arranging fall decorations for Thanksgiving. At 5:12 p.m., she posted on Facebook, "Getting ready to host my first holiday in the new house. Blessed and grateful." It was her final post. Because while she was preparing to celebrate life, Shakia Perkins was preparing for something else. Phone records show Shakia's device pinging near the daycare, then the pharmacy, then finally Corneisha's neighborhood. At 4:30 p.m., a security camera 3 houses down picked up a sedan pulling in along the curb. No honking, no doors slamming, The driver stayed inside the car for nearly 45 minutes, watching. Inside that vehicle was a legally purchased 9mm handgun, bought just 2 weeks earlier. At 5:44 p.m., the door opened. Shakia stepped out, not storming, not pacing, calm, collected, dressed plainly, no gloves, no mask. She walked slowly toward the house and stood at the door. No pounding, no shouting. She knocked, softly. That knock was everything. Not loud enough to alert neighbors. Not threatening enough to set off panic. Just familiar. And Corneisha answered it. We don't know exactly what was said, but we know she opened the door, likely out of a hope to keep things quiet. Her toddler was resting inside. Her mother, still recovering from a stroke, was nearby. The last thing she needed was another scene on her doorstep. Shakia stepped in. It wasn't rage that followed. It wasn't a struggle. It was deliberate. At 6:03 p.m., 3 gunshots echoed through the house. One struck her in the chest. Another, the abdomen. A third passed clean through. No warnings. No screams. Just silence, then impact. Corneisha fell almost instantly. Seconds later, her 2-year-old son wandered into the room. He saw everything. He was too young to understand, but not too young to remember. He stood over his mother's body, crying. Not with the kind of scream that draws a crowd, but the quiet, confused sobs of a child who doesn't know why mommy won't answer. Shakia didn't say a word. She walked out just as calmly as she came in, stepping past the toddler like he didn't exist. She made no effort to call 911. She didn't panic. She didn't run. She got into her car and drove away. By the time a neighbor heard the child crying and called for help at 6:07 p.m., it was already too late. What happened that day wasn't a moment of blind emotion. It wasn't spontaneous. This wasn't rage. It was strategy. Cold, quiet, premeditated. She planned it. She stalked her. She waited for the perfect moment. The final trap was never an outburst. It was a checklist. And when it was done, she disappeared into the night, leaving behind a child in blood-soaked socks and a silence that would haunt that house forever. For hours, no one knew where Shakia Perkins had gone. She didn't speed off. She didn't dump the weapon. She didn't even leave the city. After pulling the trigger 3 times, after walking past a toddler covered in his mother's blood, Shakia drove to her sister's apartment across town and sat there. She didn't confess. She didn't turn herself in. She turned on her phone, and that was her first mistake, because police were already looking for her. Neighbors had described the car, the direction she drove, and now cell tower pings were narrowing it down. By 10:23 p.m., a tactical team surrounded the building. Officers moved in fast. No resistance, no chase. They found her inside, pacing, her phone still on. The murder weapon, a 9mm handgun, was in the glove box of her car, parked right outside. Also in the car, a folded-up printout, a handwritten schedule of Corneisha's daily movements, work hours, daycare pickups, grocery store times. And in her phone's draft folder, a message never sent. You can't leave me again. It's done now. Chilling in its finality. Flat. Unemotional. Like an update. Like closing a chapter. During the arrest, body cam footage captured a different tone. Gone was the calm, calculated posture she carried just hours earlier. Shakia was sobbing, slurring, rocking in place as officers cuffed her. One officer asked a standard question. Do you understand what you're being arrested for? Her response? She made me do this. Those words were repeated over and over. Soft at first, then louder. She made me do this. She made me do this. No one responded. The room was already full, with evidence. Back at the station, the charges were laid out. First-degree murder. Possession of a firearm during the commission of a felony. Cruelty to children in the 3rd degree because she pulled the trigger in front of a toddler. Violation of a protective order. Stalking. The district attorney made it clear. There would be no plea deals. No leniency. No bail. Shakia Perkins pleaded not guilty. Despite the texts. Despite the footage. Despite the child. Despite the gun, the stalking, the daily tracking notes. It wasn't remorse. It wasn't shock. It was a final attempt to control the narrative. Because even in custody, even in orange jumpsuit and handcuffs, She was still trying to play victim. But this time, the system wasn't buying it. Prosecutors pushed for the maximum. A life sentence without the possibility of parole. They had the texts. They had the timeline. They had the plan. And finally, they had her. When the headlines faded, when the police tape came down, when the courtrooms emptied out, 4 children were left behind. A teenager, 2 school-age daughters, and a 2-year-old boy who still doesn't fully understand what happened. But he saw it. He heard the gunshots. He stepped into his mother's blood. And now he wakes up in a house that no longer smells like her cooking or echoes with her voice. They lost everything in under 10 seconds. Not just their mother, but their stability, their home as they knew it, their routines, their traditions, their emotional center. Corneisha's sister, Shakia Butler, stepped in to raise all 4. No warning, no preparation, just a sudden, unspoken understanding. They're mine now. She moved into Corneisha's house to keep some kind of continuity alive. Same beds, same curtains, same scent in the hallway. But nothing feels the same. They try. They go to school. They do their homework. They laugh sometimes, because kids are resilient. But trauma doesn't sit quietly. It shows up in nightmares, in silence, in sudden tears at the dinner table. The oldest daughter, now a young teenager, has turned her pain into purpose. She started speaking at school events, talking openly about domestic violence, warning other students about controlling partners, about red flags that don't look dangerous until they're too close. People think it could never happen to them, she told one class. But my mom asked for help. She begged for it, and no one helped her. That's how fast it can happen. On Mother's Day, 2023, they held a small ceremony at her gravesite. No press, no crowd, just family. Each child wrote a handwritten note to their mom, folded it, tied it to a balloon. They let go all at once. The wind carried the balloons high until they disappeared completely. There were no speeches, just tears, and the quiet kind of grief that doesn't scream, it just stays. And that's the part of this story no one sees on a police report. The after. The nights when the toddler wakes up crying for someone who isn't there. The mornings when the youngest daughter sets the table for 5, then pauses. The fear that creeps in whenever the doorbell rings. Because they remember that their mom did everything right. She called the police. She filed the restraining orders. She showed the evidence. She died anyway. And now, the people she fought hardest to protect, her children, are living with the silence the system left behind. They were the ones she sacrificed for. They were the reason she worked 2 jobs, bought a house, chased peace. And now, they carry her legacy, not through courtrooms, but through survival, through finding ways to keep living in the wreckage, through the strength to speak out, through the courage to say her name. She died asking for help, and now her kids are living with the echo of every call that wasn't answered. This isn't just a story about one woman. It's a story about the gap between law and justice, between paperwork and prevention, between survival and statistics. And it's not rare. Every year in the U.S., thousands of women are murdered by current or former partners. Many of them asked for help. Many of them were ignored. So we ask, what can change before another woman's life becomes just another headline? Because maybe someone you know is living through their own version of this right now. A friend whose partner texts constantly. A cousin whose confidence has quietly disappeared. A neighbor who's pulled away from everyone she used to laugh with. These signs don't always scream. Sometimes they whisper. So ask yourself, have you seen them? Felt them? Ignored them? You might save a life by paying attention. And if you need help, or know someone who might, here's where to start. Telephone receiver National Domestic Violence Hotline. 1-800-799-SAFE-7233. Or text START to 88788. It's free. It's anonymous. And it's open 24/7. Because silence kills. And awareness? It saves. If Corneisha's story moved you, help us share it. Like this video. Subscribe to True Crime Undercover. And turn on the notification bell so you never miss stories that need to be heard. Because silence is what her killer counted on. And we're here to break it.